Hello everybody. I want to add one thing to Pedro's introduction. Actually, in the context of the MIS Urban Design, we are now also collaborating with Pedro Rivera's office for a MoMA exhibition that will take place in November that is called Uneven Road. So we're looking forward to the result of this collaboration. You will be able to see it in New York in November. And then I want to use also want to use the occasion to thank Pedro not only for the invitation, but also to thank Mark Wheatley and Pedro in general for the Studio X initiative, because we took several times advantage of the space. We had 2 exhibitions here, several workshops with the community. We use it as a channel for communication with the communities, and I think I really can say that without Studio X, we wouldn't be so advanced as we are right now. So thank you for that. The title of the presentation that I put together for this lecture is APB, Popular Brazilian Architecture, Hybrid Urban Development Between Generic and Specific. You see actually an image from an exhibition here in Rio de Janeiro at Studio X that took place in June 2012, I think. And the title says that we are actually in between the favela, which we could call a specific development, and now we are also working on the mass housing program Minha Casa Minha Vida, which is more related to the generic. And I would like to show also the convergence between generic and between specific and generic. The lecture will follow the 3 years of the MAS program, Master of Advanced Studies of Urban Design. Is a postgraduate program under the chair of Marc Angelil at the ETH Zurich. Each year we do a publication, so it's quite easy to just follow the course of this program through the publications. And so I will have 3 chapters, but rather talking about the thinking behind it than the projects. If you want to see the projects, you should check the book. The first book is called Building Brazil, the Proactive Urban Renewal of Informal Settlements. And in this book, even though the cover shows Rio de Janeiro, we were heavily involved in Sao Paulo, collaborating with the CEHAB, Elisabeth France's team, and we actually learned quite a lot. We learned a lesson that is expressed in the title. We learned that we shouldn't just look at the favelas as marginal areas. Elisabeth already talked about that, but as parts of the city, as just simply settlements, and even more as settlements that have the potential to become the future of the city, because they are compact and because it's based on pedestrian and because it's based on social networks and so on. We think that these settlements can actually become future models. So that's why the title. The image shows also the division, and it's very explicit in Rio, between the formal and the informal city. I selected an image of Hehl Pedras because you're working also on that. In the background you see Barra da Tijuca, and you see these different worlds. And you would say, these 2 worlds are not connected, which is not true. Obviously, they are very well connected. They are an integrative model. I would say even that today's economy is actually producing informality in the same way as it's producing these housing models that you can see in the background. Condomínio fechado, it's the gated condominium. And the people that live in these favelas in Jacarepaguá, Barra da Tijuca, they work obviously in these areas, and the formal developments, they take advantage of the cheap labor of the favela. So it's an integral system. And even more, these settlements, well, they are called favelas, but favela probably is more like a cultural definition, I think. But you could say they are informal, so it's about urban informality, but it's also about the popular city. And more we get away from this term informal. sometimes they're highly formalized, just but in a different ways, according to different rules, according to self-organization. So we are more and more saying that these are popular urbanizations with a kind of popular intelligence. And on the other side you have the gated condominium, which is a generic model. You know, it's implemented by the market economy, and it has a certain standard. It is surrounded by fences. It's highly privatized. And if you compare it with the favela, it's a closed city. It's not an open city. And we think that the favela is also, in this sense, a better model, because it is more open as soon as it is pacified, as soon as it is freed from crime. Now here again, the privatized areas for Barra da Tijuca and then Rio das Pedras, which has an amazing organization, community organization, as you probably already experienced. These two plazas, the soccer field and the marketplace, are self-organized in the favela. And what is also surprising is that when you look at some buildings, you wouldn't believe that they are informal. This is built by a kind of informal building industries, and I would say sometimes these informal developments are better than the social housing models that are implemented in this place. So that's why we say, you know, it's not only about the favela informality, it's another way of production that we call popular organization. And you can see how we develop ideas around that model. In the second book, we were just looking at one area, which is Cidade de Deus, City of God. I guess most of you know very well from the well-known famous movie. And here it's about hybrid formations between formal and informal. Why? Cidade de Deus was built in the 60s in an area where favelas were totally eradicated, removed. That was the policy. It was the beginning of the military dictatorship. Here you see how favelas are just burned down, and instead they built formal housing, social housing in the periphery where the land is cheap. On the right hand side you can see Villa Kennedy, and the name also says that the United States were involved with the so-called Alliance for Progress program. And the idea was to promote private home ownership actually as a weapon against the communist threat. You know, by that time, you know, the Cuba thing was going on. So urbanization and access to private home ownership was actually promoted as a kind of a political agenda. One of them was Cidade de Deus, that was the construction was started, I think, in 1965. 1966 the first people moved in, so the military regime was already in place. And it was built according to this American model of suburbia, you know, with single-family houses. It's a commuter settlement with very bad public transportation access. Some of the houses were also built as conjuntos, as slabs, according to the modernist tradition. And before the infrastructure was finished, people were already moving in because there was a flood at that time. So it was, from the beginning, it was very precarious. This is a manual that was developed for this settlement, where they say, so now this house is yours, esta casa es sua, and it was about financing your own dream of your own house. Then you know very well, the movie shows the story, but it shows particularly the most violent part of the history of Rio das Pedras. Starting from the 80s, it became the place where drug gangs were ruling in the area. Drugs gangs means like kids wearing weapons, dealing with drugs. And the movie also shows that this part of the history is also related to a certain kind of perception. So these guys were considered as the bad guys living in the favelas, right? So that's why a kind of stigma or cliché emerged out of that, even though Cidade de Deus was not a favela, it became a favela afterwards. Here you can again see images from the beginning. Actually, the original layout was not too bad, at least there were some plazas conceived and a quite interesting diverse pattern for it. Here you can see the same thing in axonometric drawing, and we did research on that, just drawing the houses. This is how it looks now. Totally informalized. Sometimes you still see the houses popping out. So another layer was built on top of it, right? Sometimes the plazas were occupied, but sometimes they were not. And it became a denser city. It becomes an urban area. On top of that, nowadays it's located in a quite central areas where most of the facilities of the Olympic Games will be installed also. It's the new expansion zone, it's the new center of Rio de Janeiro. So we studied how this informalization process happened from the single family house. They started to first build walls to delineate the private area, and then they add extensions to the left and the right. Finally, they built vertical extensions. This was for us really a surprise, because we went there, we weren't sure if it's secure or not, but finally we realized it has quality. And because of the merge between formal and informal, you know, the streets are larger than in the favelas, you can breathe, there is public space, but you have the informalization, you have small-scale commerce in the area. So that's why we, in certain areas of Cidade de Deus, we thought it's a quite pleasant city, a city within the city. After that, we became very curious about this question of mass housing in Brazil. And we realized that there is this huge program, this massive program called Minha Casa Minha Vida. It started in 2009 based on a study that identified a housing deficit of 6 million units. The program was launched in a moment just after the global financial crisis that affected also a little bit Brazil, not that much, but also. And the general idea of Minha Casa Minha Vida was to build 3.4 million units until 2014, and this had to be done also as an economic driver. So they wanted to stimulate the construction industries and at the same time providing social housing. A model that you can already put in question if this works, to use social housing to stimulate the economy of the country, but that was the idea. So it's mainly based on the generic model. Here you see block buildings, and here you see the single family houses. Usually it's based on a very repetitive pattern. Again, the single family house has between 35 and 45 square meters. And then the slab buildings, obviously, they have the same amount of square footage, but these are apartments. Similar to Cidade de Deus in the beginning, the idea is to give access to home ownership. So the program is a financing plan to give people a private property, really low-income people. Here are some models. It's super generic. I would even say it's more generic than Cidade de Deus in the beginning. These are the worst examples. There are some better examples, but they are in remote areas because it's cheaper over there. And you could basically say everything you can make wrong as an urbanist and planner is made wrong here in this program. It's a slap in the face for urban planners. We were curious about this project. We were researching it, holding it against the favela experience, right? And the favela experience was also stimulating us to do a research on popular Brazilian architecture, APB we called it, because we wanted to hold the specific against the generic. We wanted to see what is specific about Brazilian spaces, what is specific about the popular way of building. And that's why we did just a collection of elements inspired by Christopher Alexander's pattern language. Here, for example, the favela as an area that is built out of one material, which actually has a quality, I think, if everything is built out of one material. But then also details like the bucket gardens that stimulate the spaces with a little greenery. But also elements like the Kobogo. Kobogo is super interesting because it comes from vernacular architecture, translated by the modernists and becoming a typical modernist element because it is also serving for ventilation. Nowadays you can find it everywhere. It's a popular product. Everywhere in the favelas you have Kobogos. So it's a transversal architectural element. We were also interested in activities here in the city in the north of Brazil, Plaza. I would say very formal, the way they put the chairs, even though you could also call it informal. And we were interested in Brazilian life, the carnival, which we think is a very important component of popular culture. And with this in the background, we studied last year 4 places and did projects on these 4 places. One was an area in Rio de Janeiro, one was in Sao Paulo in the North Zone, Brasilandia, a third one in Brasilia, a satellite town in Brasilia, and the fourth one actually in the Amazon region. And I want to just show the last one in the Amazon region. It's in Pará, a city called Pedras. It's connected to the coast by a train, because this train brings raw iron to the coast and then it is shipped to mainly China and Asia. It holds the biggest open pit iron ore mine of the world. This mine that we just visited last week has a diameter of 28 kilometers, and there is a city connected to it, where the workers live, right? This city is called Paraupebas. It has the highest growth rate in Brazil, growth rate of 30%, and nowadays there are 250 people living in the city, so more or less every year we have 20,000 people more. So that's why they already started to do Minha Casa Minha Vida projects there, of this governmental program. And we were looking at these areas, we were researching, and I have a series of images holding these settlements against the Cidade de Deus, the City of God images. City of God in black and white, Minha Casa Minha Vida in Paraupebas in color. The same story happens. You know, the same kind of street life, similar kind of street life. This settlement is 3 months old. The people already start to informalize, to build walls, to change the windows, to change the standards, because the standards are not good. They occupy the streets, building activities. They put some plans to make the houses nicer. They paint it. And sometimes they have additions. These are illegal additions that are bigger than the house itself, because the program doesn't provide commercial services, commercial programs. Our question was, do these cities, Minha Casa Minha Vida settlements, become also ghettos in the future, like Cidade de Deus? There is a high risk. Would they be able to transform in a lively urban area through informalization, through informal activities? What is happening with them? And we were quite interested in this mix between formal and informal. So we did projects that are really working with the program. So not saying we have to reinvent this program, it's a big machine, it's there. It gives access to home ownership, but we then assist the informalization process. We add another layer of planning on top of that, that would introduce public spaces, that would introduce greenery, that would organize the communities in a better way. And these projects were presented first in Studio X, and then a second in the Architecture Biennial in Sao Paulo last year. This is an image from Sao Paulo. I just show some images of models where we test building interventions inside the areas, and we also apply the APB, the Popular Brazilian Architecture Catalog, in our buildings. So for example, this is a housing type that has a garage shop, a very popular element, that they just transform garages into shops. Interesting enough, when we presented the exhibition in Studio X, it was exactly on the same day when the major protests, demonstrations happened in Rio. I don't know how many people were in the street, 1.2 million. 1 million people in the street, exactly in the same moment where we had the talk here. It was becoming really crazy, like war zone outside. But the people from the ministry of the cities, they were curious, and some of them came. Some of them made it, others were just stopped at the airport because the airport was totally shut down. And in this situation where people were calling for more public services, you know, claiming more participation and so on, this situation was very emotional. And even though we criticized a lot the program, of course, the people from the ministry, they liked it. You know, they were so emotional that they said, yes, you're right. Cidade de Deus example shows it. We have to do something. Yeah. Now, when already 1.2 million units are built, you know, it's almost the end of the second phase of the program. But they invited us to do a project. Sorry. Which was sponsored by the Hehl Foundation, this mining company that operates in Pedras and other parts. It's the second biggest mining company of the world. And they asked us to develop additional guidelines on top of the Minha Casa, Minha Vida that will be sponsored by funds of the Hehl Foundation. And with these guidelines, the generic model of Minha Casa, Minha Vida would be improved, would be transformed in a better place. So it's more like incentives. It's not rules, regulations. It's like some ideas, concepts that people can realize and they will get extra money for it. So it's a lot about including the people, integrating the people during the planning process. Participation is something people already know that they are involved in favela projects. But here it's almost like Minha Casa, Minha Vida upgrading. You know, you have to upgrade new settlements. You don't upgrade just the favelas, but we already have to upgrade newly built settlements with a kind of participation process based on also the formation of cooperatives and so on. The general idea is, I should first already explained it, there is the generic model, but the city is growing over time, the city is changing over time. Usually cities are changing. It's about incremental way of building, incremental urbanism. So we didn't want to do a perfect settlement, we just wanted to initiate a process that can be continued in a better way. So we are thinking about growing houses, we were thinking about a nucleus that would enable the people to make a better place out of the minimal standard. And we have ideas about flexible floor plans, because Minha Casa, Minha Vida has always the same floor plans, and families are different. I mean, like basic things we all know as architects and urban planners, that these are fundamental things you have to do according to the profile, but we had to go back to these basic things to improve the program. So these guidelines that are called Cartilha de Qualidade Urbana are about basic things that would improve the generic models of the market. And I think this is not only valid for Minha Casa, Minha Vida. Most of the architecture production in the world is generic, done without architects. It's just a copy-paste mode. And here we tried to include the popular intelligence and also the lessons from the favela in this program in order to make a kind of convergence, the merge between formal and informal, which we think can lead really to a more sustainable model if it's done in the right way. And in the end, I would like to read one thing, because APP is also inspired by MPB, Música Popular Brasileira. It's Música Popular Brasileira is something that is very wide range. You know, there is samba, there is folk, there is rock music. It's a big mix. It's a hybrid that I think also brings people together, because everybody is listening MPB. And some of the proponents, like for example Gilberto Hehl, who was also a Ministry for Culture for a while, was part of this movement with a special branch, within a special branch called Tropicalia. Tropicalia wanted to open the Brazilian experience to international context. It was about, inspiring Brazilian culture by rock culture, by pop culture, and so on. And the favela experience was very important for the tropicalist people, musicians, but also artists like Hehl and Sica. And one of the albums he did, Gilberto Gil, is called Favela. And I just want to quote one thing, first in Brazilian. A Favela, a escola de samba paradoxal, brasileirinho pelo sotaque, mas de língua internacional. The Favela reveals the paradoxical samba school, quite Brazilian in its accent, but international in its language. For us this was interesting, and I want to end here, because the favela experience, and also this idea about specific and generic, is not only valid for Brazil, as I already said, but learning from popular intelligence, learning from the favela experience can be important for the international context. And I think it's very interesting also in the context of the Columbia studio here to think about this exchange, right? So how to bring the favela outside and how to bring the international experience of good architects, how to bring this to these places. I think this is a fantastic project. Thank you.